Hello, I'm Bruce Zawalsky, author of Canadian Wilderness Survival and Chief Instructor of the Boreal Wilderness Institute. Today I want to talk about survival skills for 100 days. If you want to learn real survival skills that you need to survive when stranded, then please like this video and support my YouTube channel by subscribing. So this video was all about understanding the jigsaw of skills needed to live through into the long term. So this jigsaw of skills and physical requirements is complex, involves understanding real physiology and science, and is therefore little understood. It is also incredibly important if you realistically want to survive into the long term and beyond to last 100 days. So the who, what, why does not matter here at all. I'm not going to talk about that. We're not going to spend any time on that. Only the when, the where, but most importantly, the how. So that's what I'm teaching you today. So what are we going to learn? Well, the most important thing I'm going to talk about is the skills required. I'm also going to talk about the calories required, how long versus how good you need to be, what can go wrong, and is it possible? You may notice that I'm only covering 5 topics. Even a presentation of over an hour, it will still not teach you any skills. This means living through the long term to 100 days is a complex challenge. I'm going to point out to you, though, which skills you should learn, develop, and improve if you want to survive for 100 days in the Canadian wilderness. So this presentation is geared to the northern, the boreal, and the montane forests of Canada, or other similar temperate environments. This essentially means the areas that the WGA, or the Wilderness Guides Association, classify as boreal nemoral, which makes sense, of course, since I am a WGA Level 3 boreal nemoral guide. So let's talk a little bit about the types of survival situations just up front before we get started. First, you have short term. That's 1 to 4 days. That's 99% of our actual survival situations. We then have medium term, which is 5 to 25 days, and long term, which is 26 days plus. So this is different from what Morse Kohansky taught and what I wrote in Canadian Wilderness Survival in 2017. So things change. The differences here are between the medium and the long term. And these changes are due to real science. So science gets better. It improves over time if we actually research and experiment. We learn to understand foraging, fasting, and starvation better. So fasting is considered a medium-term solution. So what does that mean? Well, for 20-ish days, you will suffer less fasting. After that, you are going to suffer the effects of starvation anyhow. So essentially, after 25 days, you're either starving or thriving. So you could, of course, choose to fast at a later time within that 100 days, but only if you could break the fast safely and only if you were thriving up to that point. If you're starving, you cannot just start fasting. It just won't do you any good. So the real skills required can easily exceed anyone's individual grasp. So let's talk about those skills. What skills do you actually need when you're out in the wilderness? So we'll start with the skills list. So let's talk about the skills you really need to have, those you need to build up, and those you need to develop better to survive for 100 days. So the red are the essential short-term survival skills. And they are important to our survival. And what are they? Well, they are wilderness first aid, camping and wilderness living, wilderness survival, wilderness navigation, wildlife awareness and safety, and lastly, number 6, wilderness weather awareness and forecasting. Something I think that gets a short shift, but is really, really important. So those are your top 6. They're, again, the red, the essential short-term survival skills. The orange is next. These are essential long-term survival skills. So if you want to survive more than 26 days, you're going to need to learn these skills. And in this section of the list, order becomes a little bit more important. So bushcrafting is first. But just as important are the 4 basic food acquisition skill sets. And that is fishing, trapping, hunting, and edible plant ID foraging and preparation. Now, I've put those in an order, And what is that order? That's the order that they're most likely to have a chance of sufficiently acquiring calories and fat in the northern boreal or montane forest. So that's the order in terms of where you're most likely to be able to get the calories and fat you need to survive. You have to have 2 of these 4 skill sets well acquired. So preferably all of them. So it's perfectly that you're good at all of them, but you can only be so good at stuff. So 2 of these you got to be really good at. Now, note that number 12 is medicinal plant ID, foraging, and usage. It's important as well, but if you die of dehydration or starvation, no medical plant will save you. It's just not the way it works. So how about green? So green are the skills that will help you out. They will make your life easier and your survival longer. You need them if you want to thrive. So now we're going from survival to wilderness living to thriving in the wilderness. And that includes tracking, food preservation and safe food storage, long-term shelter building and fireplace stove construction, and lastly, long-term crafting skills. So these are the 16 skills, or skill sets as they really are. As you'll notice, bushcrafting isn't a skill, it's a skill set. So all of these have individual skills that we're going to talk about individually and say, hey, and I'll point out some of the skills that are really, really important. Some of these skills are going to be life-saving or far more important at different times and in different locations and situations. That's one of the reasons why when I'm teaching survival, I teach something called the cell of survival, which is science, skill, equipment, and luck. The idea of that, we'll talk a little bit later as it comes up again at the end. So, wilderness first aid, number 1. So why is it number 1? Oh, because it doesn't matter how good you are at friction fire lighting if you're bleeding to death and don't know how or did not carry a tourniquet in with you. So that's going to be more than basic first aid. That's going to move you into wilderness trauma care. Notice what's bold there. Wilderness hygiene and sanitation. That's because it's a skill you need to build up and understand, and it's underrated. When I bold these on the slide, it means I say they're essential individual skills that you need to learn, along with wilderness evacuation skills and tending patients and self with herbal remedies. No use having herbal remedies if you can't actually give them to a patient or yourself. So number 2 is camping and wilderness living. So we'll start with choice and care and cleaning of wilderness clothing, basic camping skills, and outdoor cooking skills. That's the basic stuff. Learning to cook over a fire, learning to cook with a stick burner, safe water collection, and basic water purification. That's being able to use a filter, boil your water, do whatever it happens to be that you can do. That's basic skill stuff. Feces, urine, food waste, and garbage disposal, which should all be done differently, really, especially over the long term. Understanding forest area ecology, understanding the geography of the location you're in, safe wilderness travel skills, along with 2 very important Canadian winter ones, which is safe water crossings and safe ice crossing. Now, many people will rightly point out that these are necessary hiking and backpacking or wilderness living skills in the Canadian wilderness. Yeah, absolutely. And nearly every outdoor educator and outdoor education program will and should teach all of these skills. Those skills, of course, have to be taught correctly, and you have to learn them. It's just the way it is. So then we slide into wilderness survival. Again, these skills have to be taught correctly. You start with survival tool selection, knife craft, whether teaching you to use a knife, a baton, a multi-tool, using your survival tools like a bow saw, a pruning saw, an axe, or a hatchet, and then the 3 most important ones. So fire lighting and management, shelter building, and improving water purification. So those are your top 3. Along with safe wood harvesting, basic notching, improvised bind crafting, signaling for help, and the food challenge, which in the wilderness survival situation is going to be scavenging, because that's all you're going to do. How about wilderness navigation? What's right at the top? Natural navigation and that ability to use a compass. Those skills combined will be the most important wilderness navigation skills, along with topographical map reading, air photo reading, GPS receiver use, cell phone app use. What good are they in the wilderness? Do they work? Do they not work? One that people might not think about as you wander around and hike, but is incredibly important in a survival situation, and that is blazing, trail marking, and trail making. You cannot underestimate how important that can be to reducing calories and stopping you from getting lost. And lastly, night navigation. It's the Canadian wilderness. At 5 o'clock, it's getting dark in the fall. You need to understand night nav. Wildlife awareness and safety, again, has to be taught correctly, and you're going to start with basic wildlife awareness, along with bear awareness and behavior, because bear behavior is an incredibly important thing that we need to learn. Food hanging techniques, campsite setup and safety. How do you make sure you reduce your chance of unwanted wildlife encounters? Travel safety when you're traveling, and of course, how to properly use bear spray and bear bangers. There's no use carrying something that you don't know how to use properly. So again, these skills have to be taught correctly. I will note that the last 4 slides are shameless plugs for the Boreal Wilderness Institute and its programs. So if you want to learn wilderness survival, wilderness navigation, wildlife awareness, and safety, take your time to learn both online and in person from BWI, because we'd love to have you come out and take a program with us. Next is one of those ones that I said was underrated and incredibly important and often taken for granted, and that's wilderness weather awareness and forecasting. I build that into my programs. I'm teaching it all the time, but it's something you got to understand. So understanding the weather, understanding local weather knowledge, and learning local weather knowledge when you arrive in an area, because things change. Wilderness weather forecasting and daylight forecasting, an incredibly important skill. Storm preparation and storm survival techniques. Why is that important? Well, with climate change, it's exacerbating our weather problems, and it doesn't matter what its causes are, it makes it worse, and it will make it worse over the next decade as we travel in the Canadian wilderness, along with, of course, lightning awareness and survival, which has always been a big thing. But you have to understand the weather. So that is our top 6. That is the red, that's the essential. So let's move into the orange, which is, again, essential long-term skills. So number 7 is bushcrafting. So why is it number 7? Because it doesn't matter how cool of a bushcrafter you are and how many knots you know if you die of hypothermia on day 2. So bushcraft is the use and practice of skills thereby acquired in developing knowledge and understanding in order to thrive in the natural environment. And for 100 days, you will need to thrive. That's what it is. So we start with the top, bushcraft tool selection, and then the 4 big ones: forest foraging, cord making, bind crafting, and wood crafting. So those are the skill sets you need to learn in bushcrafting. Flint knapping would be good. Basket making and bark crafting will allow you to do what? Make containers. And knife and tool sharpening is going to be important, especially if you don't have a sharpener. And fire by friction. So those are the skill sets. What about the actual skills I would recommend? So these are the ones that I'd like to point out. There's more, but these are the ones I point out. Number 1 would be improvised shovel making. First improvised shovel, about 100,000 years old now. Learning to make a good, strong, decent shovel as one of your first tools is an incredibly important thing, because then you don't have to carry a shovel with you, which saves a lot of weight. Walking staffs. I know Morris always, when we did courses, the first thing he'd have us do is all make walking staffs. So we had that staff with us. A good 6-foot tall, heavy, thick black spruce staff most of the time, and it was really nice to have, and we used it for all sorts of things. How about the Roycraft snowshoe, or sometimes called the Roycraft ski shoe? Now, Morris Kohansky taught it to all his students for decades. And strangely enough, it had 4 skills for the price of 1. Why? Because this teaches you forest foraging, cord making, bind crafting, and wood crafting. So he was teaching you 4 essential bushcrafting skills for the price of 1 project. Now, I will link in a video above by my friend Dale Koselik, which was filmed at Karamat Wilderness Way's winter course. If you want to learn more about this incredible piece of wilderness equipment, that'll help you get pushed into the right direction. Roycraft pack frame is good. An improvised drill. What's the good about an improvised drill? Well, because with an old nail and your skill in fire by friction, in 5 minutes, I can teach you how to do a drill. And a drill is actually a useful wilderness tool, right? That'll might save your life. Spoon, cutlery, and bowl making, again, making your life better. Storage containers of all types. And then 2 things that we underrate as bushcrafting skills. And I see some really crappy things, and that is improvised raft building and improvised boat building. These are real skills, and you must practice them before you go out in the wilderness. You can't expect to build a good boat if you haven't built a good boat already. You can't expect to build a good raft if you haven't built a raft already. Tested it, understood how they work, look at the dynamics of it in the water, and paddled it about on a nice summer day to make sure you know, hey, this thing's going to function. This is going to float. I'm not just losing all my equipment off it. All right. So from bushcrafting, we go into the basic food acquisition skill sets. And again, number 1 is going to be fishing. So we start with fishing regulations. Can you fish? What can you fish for? And then the types of fishing. So lure fishing and fly fishing. 2 different techniques. But then we get back into fishing regulations. So a couple years ago, I spent some time in Labrador, and I was very surprised, having only used a lure to fish, that only fishing I was allowed to legally do there was fly fishing. And it was like, oh, I guess I have to learn to fly fish, which I'd never done before. Gill net fishing. If you're going to use a gill net, how do you do that? Along with basic fish trapping and ice fishing. And another one we don't normally think of, ice fishing safety systems. Why? Because if you're out for 100 days, if you go into the season where it changes, you're going to want to ice fish as quickly as possible. That means knowing those safety systems is going to be important. If you're in an ocean, well then ocean fishing. And also on an ocean coast, foraging for mollusks and sea creatures. So if you're going to use clams and mussels as part of your food, then you better be able to understand how to actually harvest them. So what about the skills? Well, fishing identification and lure flies are needed, along with your fishing time and location. Gutting and cleaning a fish, a skill I learned as a kid, but it's still important. But harvesting the entire fish, I never did that as a kid. Turning around and removing the heart, liver, and kidneys of the fish. Taking the head off, taking the skin off, boiling the head and skin, eating the cheeks, and using the entire fish essentially for extra calories. How about making improvised lures? Notice that's bold. Well, yeah, because if you're going to need to do lure fishing and you're out in the wilderness, you're probably going to have to make lures. And then learn how to do that. And then learn how to do that with the actual tools you're bringing. Because it's no use, what I can do in my workshop downstairs in my house is far different than what I can do outside using a multi-tool and a couple of pieces of wire. Making improvised flies, making fishing rods, making a gill net. Yeah, if you're going to go gill net fishing, you better be good at making a gill net and repairing your gill net. Even if you bring a commercial gill net, you might have to repair that. Making fish traps and being good at that, and of course making an ice ladder if you're ice fishing. And that's part of that ice fishing safety system. Ice ladder is probably the easiest one to do. So that's fishing. So why fishing regulations matter? Well, this is a really nice picture. Now, it's a Paul Kane painting called Fishing by Torchlight from 1845. And this worked because the first peoples understood that light attracted fish. Now here's your problem. Remember I said why fishing regulations matter? It's also illegal in most forms in any province or territory in Canada and would result in at least a fine. So this is why fishing regulations matter, because you're out there practicing your skills. You're just doing that. And nobody will say, hey, well, you can just break the law. Trapping. So again, this is number 2 of our basic food acquisition skill set. So we'll start with trapping regulations. What animals can I trap? Finding and trapping small game, which is different than finding and trapping big game. Setting a proper trap line. So did you set a kilometer trap line with 20 snares because you want to catch rabbits? Or did you put down 2, which will probably never work? Checking and resetting your traps. How do you make that schedule? When do you have to go back? And then building simple snares and squirrel poles, which are 2 most likely basic trapping designs, along with improvised snares, which don't work as well, improvised traps, metal traps if you happen to be using those, and then of course gutting and cleaning the animal and harvesting the entire animal. Like figuring out where and all that extra stuff you can get to get the extra calories out of it that you're going to need, and the extra fats. So that goes from trapping to number 3 of our basic food acquisition skills, which is hunting. So we start with weapon regulations and then hunting regulations. So why is that different? Well, a good example is I live in the province of Alberta, where spear hunting is illegal, right? At least against boar. And I'm not sure what else. But you can't use a spear anymore. You used to be able to do that. So that weapon regulation stops me from even worrying about the hunting regulations, right? Then you get into hunting regulations, and then when you figure out what you're using, then you're going to go finding and stalking small game, which is different than finding and stalking big game. Bow hunting, that's going to be our normal hunting technique out for 100 days. And so one of the things we should think about is there's targetry. In other words, where do you point your bow? If I'm always like this, I'm firing my bow, and that's to the ground. And that's your standard targetry. But in reality, there's water, ground, tree, aerial. So there's 4 target areas that you need to understand where your arrows go, how they fly, and how you'll recover them. Because that's the recovery and use of arrows. Spear hunting, which would be stabbing, club hunting, which would be clubbing, thrown weapon hunting, which is going to be bolos or rocks, along with, of course, gutting and cleaning the animal and harvesting and using the entire animal. Because that's going to come up, right? That's number 10. Number 11 is our 4th of our basic food acquisition skills, and that's edible plant ID foraging and preparation. So we'll start with plant foraging regulations. It's pretty simple, either you can or you can't. But then I break it down into 5 areas. Edible plant and root ID, berry ID, lichen, fungus, and mushroom ID, seaweed ID, and bark and tree ID. If you happen to be, stripping inner cadmium bark off and boiling it or something. Then you have seasonal foraging of edible plants. So in other words, what plants can I forage when? Preparation of edible plants, storage of edible plants. But I think really, really important is understanding the vitamins and minerals needed and the calories expected from plants. And a lot of people have this idea that you're going to live off the land on plants. No vegetarian can survive in the boreal forest. It's just not going to happen. There's not enough calories there. And then dealing with poisonous and inedible plants. So a lot of plants are inedible, so we're eating leaves or other stuff like that. It's costing us calories and we're not getting anything from it. So the last orange one is medicinal plant ID foraging and usage. Again, plant regulations is pretty easy. Either you can or you can't, right? Medicinal plant ID. Foraging medicinal plants, usage of medicinal plants, and preparation of medicinal plants. So those 2 are very, very important. How you use it and how you prepare it. Storage of medicinal plants, and then medicinal non-medical plant-based natural cures. So I'll give you a couple of examples. So how about a plant example? Well, plantain. Well, the leaves are edible. Okay, so you can eat them. So it's an edible plant. Fairly common. You can brew tea from the leaves, which is used to treat coughs and also traditionally for diarrhea. But you could turn it into a poultice and use that for sores, blisters, swelling, and insect stings. What's the problem with that? You need to know how to prepare that poultice and what proportion of ingredients you put in that poultice. If you don't, it might not work. How about a non-plant-based example? This is a really classic one, which is charcoal. Activated charcoal is used in an emergency treatment of certain kinds of poisoning. But you would need to know in advance how to make and activate it safely. If you do not have enough knowledge, what happens? You could be a danger to yourself or others. So you could be poisoning yourself trying to treat yourself and doing no good at all. So that's orange. So now we get into those long-term skills, the greens. And number 1 is tracking. So self-rescue when lost. So here's the deal. If you cannot track yourself, you cannot track. I will say that a second time. If you cannot track yourself, you cannot track. Use and understanding of game trails for navigation, and that'll lead to asking questions like, well, why are the game using these trails? And that'll lead to what? Better camp selection, better trapping, better hunting, and better foraging. So tracking is an excellent skill to improve and thrive better in the wilderness. How about safe food preservation and safe food storage? Well, Proper location-based, seasonal-based food preservation is critical. And the two normal things we talk about is air drying and smoking, both of which you have to have good, both of which you have to understand. So for smoking, for example, you know that you never use evergreen when you smoke because it's going to put carcinogens in from the smoke and it's going to just taste horrible, right? So you're going to use alder or willow or birch or something else. But you need to learn those two skills. There is more though, there's more techniques. Most people don't learn these other techniques, but then on the season and location, they may come up. So that includes curing using salt. So if you had the ocean, well, then you can use curing. Burial, putrefaction, which is rotting of the food, which actually works surprisingly well. Wrapping and freezing. So that's 7 different techniques, not just the 2 that normally people think about. Okay, so safe storage to protect food from insects, animal, and weather. That will include making food containers and food caching and food hanging. So a very, very essential skill to learn and a very bushcrafty skill, but an important one. And long-term shelter building and fireplace stove construction. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a list of what I believe is the top 3 shelters that you can build out in the wilderness. So number 1 is the A-frame. I believe that the A-frame is the best of the bunch. Number 2 would be a teepee. I don't like the teepee as much. It works all right. I think it has some waste space in it, and I don't like waste space, but it works almost as well. And lastly is the simple dugout. That's number 3. Notice there is no log cabin on this list. So building it will simply kill you. You are committing suicide by excess calorie consumption by building one. Now, keep your shelter size down. Understand shelter location and safety. So where you're building the shelter is incredibly important. And then building a proper raised bed and a 4-finger bow bed, right? That's going to be incredibly important to your survival. Building a 6-figure bow bed would even be better. But you have to build a comfortable, decent shelter that's not too big, that is out of the weather, that is protected and safe, and that will keep you warm on cold days. Because that's what's going to happen. With that, fireplace and stove using the ingredients you have in the boreal forest, which is going to be stone, clay, sand, improvised mortar, and wood. And of course, you'll need to find clay and other materials and make mortar. So that means you'll need to learn to forge and find clay and make that mortar. Building a fireplace usable in cold weather is going to be a big thing. Building a proper cooking surface, finding a proper, building a proper flume and chimney, building a proper spark arrestor, and much more importantly, I guess of all of them, fire hazard, fire suppression, and fire prevention. So in other words, what can you do to reduce the chance of any shelter fire? Because that's going to be a big thing. So what's left? Number 16 is what's left. Long-term crafting skills, included but not limited to probably the most important one, sewing, along with weaving, pottery, basket making, blacksmithing, metalsmithing. You say, well, I'm not going to have any metal. But all over Canada, you may find litter. And those tins can be used if you have blacksmithing and metalsmithing skills. Tanning, leather crafting, shoemaking, bow making, fletching. That'd be an incredible skill to be good at if you're going to actually use a bow and arrow, because you can make your own arrows. And soap making. All right, so there's your skills. So you need to consume more calories than you use. All right, that's not a big problem. So calories required. Strangely enough, the moose on the left is more calories than the grouse on the right. And that's just the way it is. So let's talk about the calories you need to survive. So your BMR, or basal metabolic rate, is the calories you use every day, simply existing. And the simplest way to work out your BMR in weight is your pounds times 100. Meaning if I'm a 91 kilogram or 200 pound person, I would use 2,000 kilocalories a day. So that would be my standard calorie burn, just existing. BMR plus is what you actually are using when you're stranded out in the wilderness or traveling out in the wilderness. And BMR plus is your basal metabolic rate plus the calories burnt for exercise, calories burnt for temperature maintenance, which can increase your calorie burn by up to 40%, and altitude. So if you happen to be at a higher altitude, you're burning more calories. So BMR plus is generally about 4,000 kilocalories plus in a cold, tough survival situation or on a wilderness expedition. Simple way to get a rough idea of calorie usage in cold, tough conditions is to use the simple formula 57 kilocalories per kilogram. So a 91 kilogram or 200-pound person would be 5,187 kilocalories. That's roughly 2.5 times the calories used while sitting around at your home. So you're going, oh wow, that's burning a lot more calories. Remember that you need to consume more calories than you use each day of a survival situation. Gaining large amount of weight or fat will not help you that much. Why? Because if you gain large amounts of weight, it makes walking, bushcrafting, fishing, trapping, hunting, and foraging far harder. A little bit extra weight, yeah, quite handy, but only a little bit extra. That's it. More muscle will also help you. So that's how it works. Fasting is a medium-term solution, 20 to 25 days. Shortfall in calories is starvation. So for a little while I can fast, and then there'll be a drop, and essentially after that it's starvation. And starvation will lead to medium-term and long-term damage to your body and eventual death. If you want to learn a little bit more about that, take my survival course seminar online. In the physiology section, we'll go into that in detail. That's part of what we cover in that course. So, other elements needed for survival. So you need to find and identify the vitamins and the minerals you're going to need, and you'll need to find those sources. So that's number 1 and 2. So these are the elements, we just need this for survival. Plants will supply you a few calories, but are still maybe important because they may give you vitamins and minerals. As well, organs from fish, small game, and large game, i.e. the heart, liver, and kidneys, can be essential source of vitamins and minerals. Interestingly enough, take a look at that example. That's a moose liver nutritional example for a mere 100 grams of moose liver. 155 calories, 5 grams of fat, 4% of your sodium, 38% of your iron, 43% of your phosphorus, 43% of your zinc, 310% of your copper, 70% of your vitamin B6, 315% of a daily requirement of your vitamin B2, and then it gets kind of weird and scary, 2,958% of your vitamin B12, and 3,200% of your vitamin A. Plus, of course, many other vitamins and minerals in lesser quantities. So, what's going to happen? One of the problems we have is, look at that 3,200% of vitamin A. That can lead to vitamin A poisoning. It's simply too much of a good thing. Now, that's 100 grams of moose liver, 3,200% of your daily vitamin A. Now remember that the average moose liver is between 450 grams or 10 pounds and 6,800 grams or 15 pounds. So it would not be necessary to eat more than 50 grams of moose liver daily, and it would give you 100 days of essentially vitamin pills if you could be successfully kept from rotting. So a little teeny bit of that moose liver every single day would be a big thing. So what else? Well, number 3 is salt. And a salt source beyond seawater is something that you'll need to find if you're not stranded in the ocean. If you're stranded in the ocean, then you have seawater and you're fine. Right? How about fat? The best, most common fat sources you can find. Now, what are the most common for us in the northern boreal or montane forest? Moose, black bear, and if we're on the coast, seal. But there's other things around, and you need to find those. And we'll talk a little bit about some of the stuff where you might be able to do that. And lastly is protein. So you need to identify easy to fish, trap, and hunt protein sources in the area quickly. And if you can, try to find them with at least 5% plus fat. So the more fat in that protein, the better off you are to be hunting, fishing, or trapping it. So I'll give you a few examples. Not a lot of examples, but a few examples. So we will start with a grouse. Now, grouse, males about 500 calories, females about 400 calories, a mere 1 gram of fat. Now, of course, that will change by season. So sometimes you might get a little bit more fat in that animal and a few more calories. Squirrel, 1. 433 calories, and 10 grams of fat. So as such, squirrel hunting might be better than grouse hunting. A mouse, a mere 30 to 35 calories and less than a gram of fat. Nah, not much. Moose meat. Now that's an interesting thing. So 500 grams or a pound of moose meat will give you 463 calories and only 7 grams of fat. But moose is actually really good. Why? Because along with moose meat, you also have moose fat. At 500 grams or a pound of it will give you 4,200 calories and 500 grams of fat. So moose fat is incredibly useful. Moose meat is not bad. And if you have a moose, of course you still eat the meat, but the moose fat is the most important part of it. How about trout? Well, there's a 10-inch trout, right? A 10-inch trout, about a half a pound, 282 calories and 14 grams of fat. So you go, yeah, that's pretty good. And if I eat everything in it, I could get, again, a little bit more of that in terms of calories and minerals. Mussels, 500 grams or a pound of mussels, more calories, 390 calories, but only 10 grams of fat. Crickets, you want to eat 12 crickets, that'll give you 100 grams or a cup of crickets. 384 calories, but only 5.5 grams of fat. So they're diminishing down when you talk about fats. How about bolete mushrooms? Why the bolete mushroom? Why did I point it out as a specific mushroom? Because it's the class of mushrooms that are the easiest for people to identify correctly and the least likely to poison you. So as mushrooms goes, that's the one I pick, right? So 100 grams or 1 cup of mushrooms, only 32 calories and 0.001 grams of fat. So mushrooms and butter are a great source of calories. Butter is also a great source of calories, right? Seaweed, 100 grams or 1 cup of seaweed, which is a fair amount of seaweed, only 45 kilocalories and only 1 gram of fat. So they're a pretty low-cal snack. Blueberries. So 2 handfuls or a cup of blueberries. You go, wow, that's fantastic to eat. But it only gives you 82 calories and less than a gram of fat. Lingonberries, same thing. A 2 big handful or a cup of lingonberries, a little bit better, 124 calories and 0.7 grams of fat. So what's the problem with the berries? They're nutritious. They don't have a lot of calories, and more importantly, they don't have a lot of fat. So they're nice to collect when they don't take up many calories to collect. So, total calories. So at 2,000 kilocalories per day times 100 days, you're going to require 20,000 calories, which is equivalent to 22.5 kilograms or 50 pounds of fat, if you're going to carry it in with you. For 4,000, which is much more likely for us, 4,000 kilocalories a day for 100 days, 400,000 kilocalories, or 45 kilograms or 100 pounds of fat. Now, if I took lard with me, which is rendered pig fat, I could get 4,073 calories for 453 grams or a pound. If I took ghee, which is clarified butter, it's a little better at 4,170 kilocalories. Flour, though, drops really significantly, 1,651 calories, and again, 100% carbs. If I go for rice, I only get 590 calories. So it's a low-cal snack, right? For a pound of that, or 453 grams. Same amount of sugar, more calories, 1,755, but it's 100% carbs, it's all simple sugars, and way less than the fats. So if I'm going to take something, obviously ghee or clarified butter would be my choice. Now, if I was burning 6,000 calories a day, well, I need 60,000 calories, or 600,000 calories. So during 100 days on the land, this is important, you will need to either carry in, fish, trap, hunt, or forage 400,000 plus kilocalories to thrive successfully. Notice I put that in red, to thrive successfully. I want to thrive, I'm going to look at 4,000 calories a day. And that's a lot. So let's take an example, because we always say, hey, we're gonna hunt big game, because this is what's going to do the trick for us, right? Well, 136 kilogram or a 300-pound male black bear. 33% is normally usable, which would give you 44.9 kilograms or 99 pounds. That will achieve 69,595 kilocalories, of which 12% will be fat. So it does meet that criteria of over 5% fat, so it's going to be good eating. But it's not more than, it's only 70,000 calories. Now, if you learn to harvest and use the entire animal, you will get a greater percentage of the black bear, maybe up to about 50%, hopefully close to 100,000 kilocalories. Now, bigger black bear, because this is like a 136 kilogram black bear, it's a fairly small black bear. Bigger black bear killed just before or early in hibernation, which usually is illegal, would lead to more weight and a greater percentage of fat. So you could gain more if you had a bigger black bear, right? But it's going to be a big challenge. So with a land mass of 9.1 million square kilometers, Canada is the second largest country in the world. So with that, we ask, how long versus how good? Well, it's totally environment dependent. And take a look at those two pictures of the boreal forest. They're very vastly different forests, even though they're the same ecoregion in Canada, or ecozone. So take a look at this map. This shows you the northern boreal or montane forests of Canada, is the big swath in the middle. That is the areas where we have a chance of surviving for 100 days. Now, remember, the less biomass in our area, the less plants, the less fish, and the less game. And as we travel farther north or farther upward in elevation, we get less biomass. So as you get into the mountains in the Taiga Cordillera and the northern end of the Yukon and the Northwest Territories, you are going to get an area where the biomass is going to be incredibly thin. When you get onto the fringes of the boreal forest, you will also have that same problem. Less biomass means less chance of surviving over 25 days and even getting into the long term. So, how long versus how good do we need to be? Well, what does it depend on? Number one is your location, along with available biomass and available fish, small game, large game, and edible plants. If you're going to use those 4 areas to acquire your food, what's available? That's going to make a difference. Along with the season. Season's going to be heavily dependent. And then the last thing, I said I'd talk about it again for a moment, which is the cell of survival. So the cell of survival is going to make a difference. And that is going to be the science, equipment, skill, and luck. So luck is sadly going to have a little bit to do with how well you're going to survive. And if you took in your equipment 100 pounds of fat as one of your excellently chosen pieces of equipment, you'd be better off. But that's not always an option. If you want to learn a little bit more of that, you can see my video of the cell of fire lighting on YouTube. You can, again, take my 2-day online survival course seminar for more information on this subject. We'll talk a little bit more about the cell of survival and explain it a little bit better. So you need to be smart and innovative, and as you starve, you get dumber. So this is going to be a challenge. You need to travel and explore the area you're living in to find the resources. So that if there's a location, what's really there? Not what you happen to be in the one spot where you're stranded, but when you walk out a kilometer, when you walk out 2 kilometers, what do you find? What do you see? What's better? What's worse? So the environment is truly neutral to our survival. So what can go wrong? If you get stranded out there, what's the big things that we can think about? Well, number one would be you die in the short term. Yeah, so that's one thing that can go wrong, along with you take a silly chance later and die. So those are the 2 top big ones. You learn the wrong skills for the environment. So you decided you could fish and there's no fish, right? You underestimated the skills needed or how tough survival is in the environment. In other words, it's great to be able to do something in my workshop. Can I replicate that at 40 below? You do not consume enough calories each day. Yeah, that's called starvation. You do not get food from multiple food sources, so you rely on one food source. You know, often we hear about this from rabbit poisoning, right? Which would be protein poisoning in reality, but any one food source is going to be a problem. You eat too much protein. So more than 25% of your daily diet is protein. Your body is just going to inject that. And it's going to burn calories, good calories, consuming that food, because about 20% of the calories goes into digestion. So you're going to lose that, and it's going to be good calories you lose, and then getting rid of that extra protein. You waste effort on overbuilding your shelter. right? We talked about that earlier, death by log cabin building. You practice poor hygiene and sanitation. So in other words, you don't keep yourself clean, you don't wash up, you don't change your underwear, you don't and wash your underwear and go back and forth and wash your clothing and all the stuff that makes a big difference. You don't brush your teeth and you just end up getting sick. And you do not think long term when it comes to tool and clothing selection, or you destroy items that you should have had or need for later. So, learn, train, innovate, and try to avoid. So I try to avoid 100 days in the wilderness, but I have to learn and train and innovate if I want any chance of doing this. So that asks us then the question, is it possible? Well, I've often said in the world of survival, you cannot cheat by carrying it, nor is losing an option. So if losing is not an option, then it's got to be possible. And then it comes to the fact that a well-fed brain is an incredible tool to help your survival, and a starving brain is an animal you're carrying about while trying to survive. So I need the calories to feed the brain. So the question comes up, is it really possible? Yes. Any 100-day challenge will be tough. So just get over that. You need to be smart, resourceful, and innovative. You need to understand the science of survival really, really well. You need to learn a lot of skills very well. So there's a large skill set. We talked about it, 16 slides of it, saying, hey, here's the skill set you need to start to learn. And you have to figure out which ones you're going to prioritize. You cannot rely on just one food acquisition skill set. Fishing, trapping, hunting, foraging. It doesn't matter how good a hunter you are, what's your second skill set? It doesn't matter how good a fisher you are, what's your second skill set? You need to bring proper equipment and enough supplies to build multiple projects and replace gear along the way. So you need to be able to do repair work. And you'll need to learn sewing and all the rest of that goes with that. And bushcrafting skills teaches you a lot of that. So good bushcrafting becomes important. You should bring rations. My recommendation is I'm going to bring rations in the wilderness for survival. I want fat infused with vitamins, minerals, and salts. And I use most of it to get through the first 25 days while exploring the area, building your shelter, setting up your trap lines, hunting blinds, and fishing systems. So I would use that energy up building my infrastructure so I can live the rest of the time. If you're smart, you would bring more than yourself. The more people you have, the greater the skill set and the more person power your group has, and the better safety backup, because now there's someone to do first aid for you. So what would I take? Well, number one, I would take my 15 critical items. You can see my book, Canadian Wilderness Survival, my article on boreal.net, and on this YouTube channel for more information about the 15 critical items. But that's what I take. That's why I have that list. Number two, 100 pounds of vitamin and mineral salt infused ghee, which is clarified butter. This would allow me 4,000 plus kilocalories per day in addition to my fishing, trapping small game, and hunting small game to supply my protein needs. So there means there is no chance of protein poisoning, no lack of calories, no lack of fat, no lack of salt, and no vitamin or mineral deficiencies in my diet at all. I would also supplement it with what? Well, with edible plants, mushrooms, and berries if and when available. Absolutely. I would not be doing that. I would certainly be doing that. And lastly, number three, another skilled survival practitioner. Even if this reduced my 4,000 calories to 2,000 calories, to share our food, a second person would be worth it because I would have a second set of hands, another set of well-developed wilderness skills, and someone else to do first aid on me, which would be handy. So, judging a successful wilderness journey. So, over the years, movies, documentaries, newscasts, and TV series have often highlighted the drama, suffering, and incidents seen during one's personal long-term journey into the wilderness. Few ever hear about survival situations, wilderness expeditions, or journeys that have little or no problems. Many consider a successful expedition simple, or the journeyers lucky if they had few problems, drama, or arguments. Few understand how hard it is to keep a long-term wilderness journey successful. Get along with your companions while your body and brain are under stress and often slowly starving. An example of this can be seen by searching the World Wide Web for Exploration's Odyssey, Life of a River Expedition. With a bit of looking, you'll find this article I wrote about my 90-day canoe odyssey on the rivers and lakes of Canada in 1989 as part of a 6-person team from the University of Alberta's outdoor education program. Now, we crossed half of North America in 3 small canoes with no shore support and before satellite safety nets even existed. Canoeing from Rocky Mountain House, Alberta, on the edge of the Rocky Mountains, to Lake Superior shores on the US-Canada border. We worked hard together as a team to make long-term wilderness journeys successful and safe. We were burning more calories than we consumed for at least the last 30 days. And it simply meant we were starving on 3 meals a day. This expedition got little attention during our journey or afterwards. On our successful return home from the shores of Lake Superior, it was played down by many, some who should have known better, but instead said it must have been easy, or it could not have been a challenge because it involved 5 women and 1 man. Since we were successful, ending up together as a group of lifelong friends in a small circle of smiles and hugs on the shore of Lake Superior, it meant that our story was not as dramatic as other stories. This expedition ended up being ignored while other less successful drama-filled wilderness expeditions or journeys have become a larger part of our collective idea of a wilderness journey. So remember, anyone who journeys in the wilderness for the long term has a real story to tell. If you travel with little or no food into the Canadian wilderness, you need the skills to thrive, not just survive. So understand, it's thriving we want to learn to do in the Canadian wilderness. So if you like this life-saving knowledge you find on this channel, then please support me by liking this channel, sharing this video, buying a copy of Canadian Wilderness Survival, and following me on Twitter and at the Boreal Wilderness on Facebook. So thank you, stay safe, and if you're stranded in the wilderness, then remember, just stop and survive.